In the early 90s, Saturday Night Live was in the midst of its second golden age. The cast at the time was stacked, with legendary names coming in like Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, Phil Hartman, Morwenna Banks.
I have no idea who this is.
It was just one of those eras where everything was hitting on all cylinders and viewers were eating it up. The show was doing some of its highest ratings since the inaugural 1970s seasons. Nothing personifies the popularity of 90s SNL than the triumph that was Wayne's World. It was only the second Saturday Night Live movie ever made following 1980's The Blues Brothers. The movie was a runaway success, grossing over $180 million at the box office. Perhaps spurred on by that success, SNL began looking into migrating some of its better-known recurring characters to the big screen. The question was, who'd be the first one to make it to the multiplex? Hans and Franz? The Superfans? Toonsis, the cat who could drive a car?
What were you guys smoking when you came up with that?
We were eating rotisserie chicken.
There were so many possibilities, but unfortunately we would never get to find out if the You Like It the Juice guys could carry a 90-minute feature film, because it turned out Wayne's World was the exception, not the rule. The SNL films that did come out in that era disappointed at the box office. First with Coneheads, then with Wayne's World 2, and then with It's Pat. A movie so poorly received it was pulled from the box office on its opening weekend. While It's Pat is regarded as infamously terrible, it didn't mark the end of the SNL film franchise. There was one film that came after that officially killed the Saturday Night Live movie dead, for like 5 years until they made the same mistakes doing it again. That movie was Stuart Saves His Family.
You know, I like this already.
The Stuart Smalley character debuted on Saturday Night Live in February of 1991 as the host of a fictional self-help show called Daily Affirmations. He would frequently have celebrity guests on his show as he tried to help them work through their issues using the power of positive thinking. The character was a send-up of the then-growing New Age and self-help movement. He even had his own mantra, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Stuart Smalley was a touchy-feely character, which makes sense given that the actor who played him was allegedly touchy-feely, but in a different way. That would of course be future US Senator Al Franken. Franken originally intended for Mike Myers to play the role, but was ultimately persuaded to perform it himself. Franken based the character on Stuart Smalley, a gentleman he met while going to Al-Anon meetings to help navigate a family member's alcoholism. The character was an instant hit and made 16 more appearances on the show in the 90s. Franken continued to visit those same Al-Anon meetings looking for inspiration throughout his run on the show, though he did admit in his book Why Not Me that, quote, I wasn't able to use any material about how crazy it was making Stuart to have me doing an impression of him, which is too bad because he talked about it a lot. The character was so popular he got his own book, an audiobook, titled kinda obviously, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. While the title is the same, the book and audiobook are actually very different. The audiobook starts off as a straightforward guided meditation, but as the tape continues it devolves into chaos.
Just because all the other drivers are uptight doesn't mean you have to be. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And I cannot change the traffic. Screaming at traffic is like standing on the shore screaming at the tide. So relax behind the wheel, close your eyes. Come on, close them. Only you can help you. That's it. Now I want you to stretch. First the toes, stretch them out.
Stuart?
Now the instep.
Stuart?
Walter, would you stop? Can you see me signaling you? This means stop.
Stuart,
Stop!
I think you can't tell a driver to close his eyes. It could be dangerous.
Similarly, the book starts off with Stuart beginning a daily affirmation journal before it turns into a diary that tracks an ongoing crisis in Stuart's dysfunctional family. It essentially turns into a novel tracking the Stuart Smalley origin story as you learn just how much his new age determination to better himself comes from a desire to avoid becoming like his screwed up family. I know it doesn't sound it, but it's funny, I swear. If you don't believe me, then maybe you believe Harold Ramis. That guy knew comedy. He was in the Ghostbusters, and he wrote the story for a little film you may have heard about, Rover Dangerfield.
I gotta tell ya, I got no respect at all. It's a story of my life.
Okay, they can't all be winners. But Ramis had just directed the legendary comedy movie Groundhog Day and was looking for his next project. When he read the Stuart Smalley book, he contacted Franken and thought it'd make a great movie. He felt that Franken had found a way to get the comedy out of Stuart Smalley without being too cynical about it. So much of Ramis's, note to self, don't do any more videos about anyone who has an S at the end of their last name. So much of Harold's best films were about examining pathos and otherwise unlikable characters, which is probably what drew him to the project, which would later become known as Stuart Saves His Family. I'm not sure if this was before or after Harold Ramis got fully involved, but the original idea for Stuart Saves His Family was wildly different. Instead of saving his family from alcoholism and generational trauma, he was going to save them from terrorists. That would have been great. Stuart Smalley in Under Siege 3. Except this time the siege is a metaphor about growing up in an unstable household. Featuring Erica Leniak. At some point, the movie pivoted to fully adapting the book and production began. The movie follows two simultaneous plot lines. The first concerns Stuart dealing with the loss of his beloved public access show. His problems are exacerbated further by the second plotline, which sees Stuart forced to return home to Minnesota to deal with a death in the family and the conflict it causes, especially with his alcoholic father. The family plot, which ironically at one point literally involves a family plot, is largely taken directly from the book, albeit with tweaks here and there. As the film progresses, Stuart has to look deep inside himself and decide, is it actually worth it for him to keep trying to save his family? That's about as much as I'll reveal about the plot. If you want to know the rest, you can Atari Millionaires Club it and buy the rights! Or rent it somewhere, I don't care. The cast for the film was immensely talented. Aside from Franken, the other actors include Laura San Giacomo as his sponsor/best friend Julia, Harris Yulin as his alcoholic father, Shirley Knight as his enabling mother, Leslie Boone as his panic-stricken sister Jody, and a young Vincent D'Onofrio as his ne'er-do-well brother Donnie. Add that to the talents of Harold Ramis directing, and on paper, everything was there to make the film great. Michael Douglas even told Al that he thought the film was a wonderful combination of funny, poignant, and sick. That's a hell of an endorsement coming from the guy who was an uncredited producer on Stone Cold.
You know, at a moment like this, I think of my father's last words, which were, "Don't, son, that gun is loaded."
Now, if you think I don't plan on doing a video about Stone Cold, then you're engaging in some serious stinking thinking. Unfortunately, a lot of people had some stinking thinking about Stuart Saves His Family, because when that movie came out, the critical reception was decidedly mixed. Amongst those who hated it was Gary Camille of the San Francisco Examiner, who said the movie was, quote, 97 minutes more of Stuart Smalley than you want to see. Considering that the film is 98 minutes long, this is not a good ratio.
You are a horrible, nasty, dysfunctional weenie.
Those who didn't like the movie mainly criticized its tone, as Stuart Saves His Family was a shockingly sincere movie, especially for the very cynical 90s. You know those streaming shows that are supposed to be comedies, but like 75% of it's about therapy and trauma? It was sort of like a funnier version of that. It was basically a dramedy, and a lot of critics did not want to see Stuart Smalley as anything other than a punchline. It wasn't all negative though, as the movie did have its champions. The eminent critics of the day, Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, both loved the movie, even with its uneven tone.
What I really like about Stuart Saves His Family is that something quite delicate is being attempted here. Al Franken's script has a core of reality and sensibility. I've read that he himself has been through a 12-step program, so he has the words right, and he just gives them an extra little spin so that they're sweet and clever, just like Stuart himself. It's a smart, funny picture.
It really is, and I was surprised because I thought that that sketch might not expand to a whole movie, and it does. And you know, at the end, this movie has more courage than a lot of presumably more serious films.
As it often goes with Hollywood, it doesn't really matter what the critics think, it's about what the paying public thinks. And the paying public did not pay at all to see this movie. It only made $371,000 on its opening weekend, and by the time it left theaters, it had made less than $1 million.
Well, that was fun.
The poor response sent Franken into a deep depression. He did make one final appearance on SNL after the film's poor response, when an uncharacteristically angry Stuart Smalley lambasted the audience for not seeing the film. Stuart decided the audience must have been too busy getting drunk and beating their children to see his movie. That would be Stuart's last appearance on the show for nearly a decade. The failure of the movie seemingly caught everyone off guard, but in retrospect, it seems kind of obvious the movie was doomed from the start. For starters, when the movie was being written, Saturday Night Live was in a golden age. By the time it came out, SNL experienced one of its worst seasons of all time. The movie's unique tone also made it difficult to market correctly, as the studio struggled to find a way to get the right audiences to come see it. It was marketed as a Saturday Night Live movie, but it wasn't really a movie for the Saturday Night Live audience. Bob Campbell of the Jersey Journal was quoted saying in his review that watching Al Franken, Stuart Saves His Family, fan out into American movie malls is like watching earnest rookie soldiers march unsuspecting toward an enemy ambush. This flawed but nervy movie is doomed to be blown away by a hostile audience. He essentially concluded that the people who had liked the movie wouldn't see it because it was a Saturday Night Live movie, and the Saturday Night Live audience wouldn't see it because it wasn't what they expected out of a Saturday Night Live movie. Plus, even if the SNL audience wanted to go, They had plenty of other options that weekend at the box office, as Adam Sandler's Billy Madison and the Chris Farley David Spade vehicle Tommy Boy were both in theaters. Ultimately, the failure of the movie might come from what Harold Ramis said he learned at a test screening, that if audiences wanted to see a dysfunctional family, they would just stay at home. The failure of Stuart Saves' family put a temporary kibosh on Saturday Night Live films, and for years it was regarded as an infamous misfire. Franken has said that he's still proud of the film and he wouldn't change anything about it, except for whatever it is that caused it to be a failure. People still come up to him and ask if there will be a sequel, but he's quoted in the book Live from New York that his standard answer to that question is, quote, "Well, the movie lost about $15 million, and I've discovered that when you lose money for a studio, they don't want to make a sequel." Now, if that doesn't tell you what this business is about, I don't know what does. It seems like the biggest advocates for the film are the same people who inspired it. The movie is very popular in the 12-step community. The movie is frequently shown to families dealing with substance issues, and Franken once remarked that his wet dream was that Rush Limbaugh was forced to watch it during his stint in rehab. As the years go on, other people are discovering and praising the movie, including yours truly. I think as long as you go in prepared for the melancholy of it all, you can appreciate what a uniquely funny and sweet movie it is. Its hybrid of comedy and drama is far more common now than it was in 1995, and the jokes about therapy, speak, and self-actualization are more topical than ever. I feel as though it's deserved its positive critical reassessment, but if you don't like it, then hey, that's your truth. From my point of view though, it's good enough, it's smart enough, and I'm not saying it again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing or hitting the doggone like button. And in the comments, let me know what you think of Stuart Saves' family. Is it a hidden gem, or is it a piece of trash? And as always, if you have ideas for videos, please let me know those in the comments below too.